Now, we had a brutal lesson from this coronavirus. I don't mean necessarily in the medical field. And it's this, that if we do not make something ourselves, we have to import it. We might not get it when we need it most in a crisis. Like face masks. China knew it had to get face masks. It makes lots and lots of face masks, bought them all up, and we ran short at the beginning. Medicines. China and India, big manufacturers of medicines that we rely on, reduce supplies of those too. And how about petrol now? Just 18 years ago, we had 8 oil refineries in this country. And then one after the other, they started closing. Today, ExxonMobil said that it would close the 6th of them, leaving us now with just 2. Now, ExxonMobil is closing the Altona refinery in Victoria. Couldn't make it pay, it says. And now it's going to turn it into a fuel import terminal. 300 jobs gone, by the way. I was joined earlier by Energy and Emissions Reduction Minister Angus Taylor. Angus Taylor, thank you so much for joining me. How bad is this news for Australia?
Well, it's obviously bad news, but particularly bad news for the workers at the Exxon refinery, Andrew. I feel for them. We all feel for them. It's a tough day for them. Obviously, losing some refining capacity is not something any of us would want. Fuel security is an important issue for this country. It does mean we'll have to hold additional stocks to make up for that loss, but we're confident that we can maintain the fuel security we need as a country through the policies that we've outlined in recent months. But again, this is not something any of us would prefer to have happen. And as I say, I do feel for the workers and their families.
Well, how does it affect our fuel supplies, even if you are trying to compensate for it? Say in, God forbid, a war or a blockade, our imports of fuel are cut off. How many days of petrol would we have?
So right now, as of November last year, late last year, we had about 86 days. We averaged 81 days across the year. It needs to be higher, which is why we've recently set a mandatory minimum stock holding with a particular focus on diesel, which is, of course, the fuel you need in an emergency situation. We saw that during COVID, so we're pushing up the stocks of diesel. We expect the oil companies to hold those higher levels of stocks. All of that is going into place. We're spending $200 million on building additional storages for those additional stocks. But Andrew, the other problem here, which has been one of the factors leading to Exxon's decision, is the rundown of crude oil production out of Bass Strait. So that's the upstream oil that goes into refineries. We're seeing that running down quite dramatically. State governments in general haven't been particularly sympathetic to getting more oil exploration happening, with the exception of the Northern Territory, where there's enormous potential in the Beetaloo Basin. So it's important that we make significant investments, and we are making significant investments in getting exploration going and production going up in the Northern Territory, which will give us that extra supply. There's a proposal for a refinery up there as well, and that will enhance our fuel security. But in the meantime, it's important we get our stock levels up, and the government, as I say, has stepped in recent months, and we're setting a mandatory minimum stock holding.
Well, last December you said you'd try to keep the refineries open by paying a 1 cent per litre production handout. That doesn't seem to have been enough. What is plan B? Are you going to have to increase that?
No, look, Exxon have made very clear it wouldn't matter what we put on the table. They were going to make that decision anyway, which, as I say, is disappointing. There's 2 more refineries in Australia, Lytton in Brisbane, and the Geelong refinery, the Viva refinery, and we're working closely with them with the production payment, which went into place from the 1st of January. But it's hard work. It's a tough time for our refineries. It's been particularly tough in Victoria because of the very big impact of COVID, the sharp reductions in demand we saw last year, and that's been a particular challenge for our 2 refineries down there. But we'll keep working with our other 2 refineries, the remaining 2 refineries, to give them every chance of success. As I say, fuel security is something we can manage through increased stocks, and we're doing exactly that. But we would prefer to have that refining capacity and more upstream oil production coming through in the near future, and that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah, and of course Victoria's been the state that seems to have been most hostile to exploration for fossil fuels, particularly gas, of course.
That's exactly right, Andrew. And just to emphasise this, I mean, the great challenge we have as the federal government is that the approvals for oil and gas production are done by state governments, and then they stand back and ignore the consequences of failing to follow through on those important developments. Now, we have a Labor government in the Northern Territory that has been very sympathetic to getting more oil and gas out, but we need state governments that understand that oil and gas is still essential to our economy. We all rely on it, and if they're not going to approve additional production, then it creates risks for all of us, and we're seeing one of those issues playing out at the moment.
What can you do when you're talking to Victoria? You're talking to global warming extremists there. But speaking of global warming, then the Prime Minister says that he'd like us, Australia, to cut its emissions to zero by 2050 net. But the Institute of Public Affairs today estimated this would cost the jobs of 650,000 workers, nearly half of them in agriculture. Is it right?
Well, no, because we've said we're only going to do this through technology, not taxation. I mean, our position on this has been very, very clear, that as low-emitting technologies become commercial relative to their higher-emitting alternatives, people will take them up, and they'll take them up because it's rational for them to do it. They'll choose to do it because the economics supports that. That supports the economy. If, on the other hand, Andrew, you tax people, you tax those higher-emitting industries, whether it's beef cattle or dairy or the gas industry, if you tax them out of existence, it will cost jobs. There's no question about that. So that's why we focus on technology, not taxation. That's the stark contrast between the approach we've always taken and the approach we've seen the Labor Party always wanting to take. And that technology, not taxation approach means that this is about making sure we strengthen our economy, not weaken it.
You've got national MPs, prominent ones, saying, listen, you've got to exclude agriculture from this. Just leave the farmers and all that alone. Do you agree with that? Are you sympathetic?
Well, I'm obviously enormously sympathetic to agriculture and the mining industry and manufacturing. I mean, these are the industries that I've been around for much of my career. In fact, I met with the head of the NFF just in the last couple of days and the head of the Minerals Council today. So, we're in constant consultation with them. It is very important we don't handcuff our export industries relative to their competitors around the world. We don't want to put them at any disadvantage. And the PM made very clear when he spoke at the press club a short while ago in the speech you referred to, that we do not want to hurt regional industries in the approach we're taking. And that's why it's so essential it's a bedrock of our approach, that it's focused on technology, not taxation. It's focused on finding solutions to bring down emissions that are economic, that are commercial, that strengthen the economy, that grow jobs and don't destroy them.
And just finally, we've got the World Health Organization inquiry saying, hey, listen, we don't know how this outbreak of the coronavirus started. We don't even know where it started. We don't know what animal it might have come from. We don't know anything. Was it really worth then Australia pushing for this inquiry? Because we've China's smashed us by hitting our exports to punish us, and at the end we still know nothing.
Well, I mean, I think the investigation, the inquiry is important, Andrew, and us taking a stand on crucial issues like this is what we should do. I mean, we have to do the right thing. Now, there are many out there who would say you should sacrifice your values, you should sacrifice your principles for a few bucks. I get that argument, but I don't agree with it. As I say, my background is in those industries that sell to China, whether it's agriculture or resources or manufacturing, and I understand the important issues here from an economic point of view. But at the end of the day, as a country, we've got to stand up for the things we believe in. We've got to stand up for the values that are important to us. That's exactly what the Prime Minister has done and will continue to do, and I strongly encourage that.
Angus Taylor, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.